How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Lead Therapy, and I really appreciate you taking your time tuning into my video. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Troy. Welcome aboard. A Texas gun shop owner has filed a federal lawsuit against the ATF. Central Texas Gunworks owner Michael Cargill has filed a federal lawsuit against the ATF, alleging the government agency is abusing its powers under the Gun Control Act of 1968 to shut down federally licensed firearm retailers for minor clerical and paperwork errors, a practice that Cargill's attorney say ignores the actual law. According to the text of the Gun Control Act, the ATF has defined evidence of willful misconduct on the part of the FFLs, something that Cargill and his attorneys say is missing from many of the revocation notices the ATF has been handing out. According to the lawsuit, the new policy under President Biden's team at the ATF has turned long-time record-keeping requirements that are supposed to prevent criminals and other dangerous people from buying guns into a weapon against the firearm industry. The act allows the federal government to revoke gun dealers' licenses to sell firearms, commonly called federal firearm licensees or FFLs, when dealers willfully violate federal or state gun laws. In a statement to the Washington Times, the ATF said it would not comment on specific litigation but defended the agency's use of the Gun Control Act. An ATF spokesman maintained the agency can only revoke a license for willful violations of the Gun Control Act. The Gun Control Act does not define willful, the spokesperson said, citing a statement from its website. Federal courts have held that a willful violation of the Gun Control Act's regulations occurs when the FFL commits the violation with an intentional disregard of a known legal duty or with plain indifference to their legal obligations. For decades, Cargill says, license revocations were an exceedingly rare step, reserved only for the worst actors, noting, for instance, that in 2013, the ATF recommended license revocations for just 81 of more than 10,000 shops that were inspected starting in the summer of 2021. However, things changed, and Cargill points to Joe Biden's White House announcement that the Gun Control Act would be enforced against rogue gun dealers, even those who never willfully intended to make minor paperwork mistakes. As part of this effort, the acting assistant director of the ATF, George Lauder, issued a memorandum instructing ATF agents in charge and directors of industry operations to revoke FFLs for a single violation in many circumstances. Since then, revocations have increased over 500%, as the ATF has effectively written out the word willful out of the statute by instituting a policy of revoking FFLs for inadvertent paperwork errors. This new definition of willful violates the plain language of the governing statute and puts all law-abiding licensees at risk of revocation for minor and inconsequential paperwork errors that do not pose a threat to public safety, nor result in prohibited possessors obtaining firearms. Cargill is now seeking a declaration from the federal judiciary that the ATF's new enforcement policy violates the Gun Control Act, as well as a permanent injunction preventing the DOJ and the ATF from ignoring the Act's requirement that violations be willful. I think it goes without saying that we all support Cargill's efforts, because until the courts rein in the ATF's executive branch overreach, things are only going to get worse. One big problem, though, as the ATF spokesman points out, is that the Gun Control Act itself doesn't define what constitutes a willful violation. Is the ATF free to interpret that word as broadly as Joe Biden wants? In his lawsuit, Cargill and his attorneys point out, while the text of the Gun Control Act may not provide a definition, the Fifth Circuit Court, the jurisdiction where the lawsuit has been filed, has done so in the past. The FFL must know of his legal obligation and purposefully disregarded or was plainly indifferent to the record-keeping requirements. In other words, an honest mistake shouldn't result in a revocation. But according to Cargill, that's exactly what's happening to FFLs across the country right now. The ATF's own prior enforcement orders reflected this willfulness requirement. The term willfulness means a purposeful disregard of, a plain difference to, or a reckless regard of a known legal obligation. ATF statistics also reflect this collaborative approach. In 2020, for example, the ATF only successfully sought revocation 40 times out of 5,823 inspections. This is despite the fact that in 2020, only 56% of the inspections resulted in no violation reports. The rest, 2,546, contained some sort of violation. The far more common response to violations of the Act were a report of violations, 1,289 instances, a warning letter, 804, or a warning conference. In 2021, licensees did even better, as the ATF sought revocation in only 27 out of 6,639 inspections, after the Biden administration announced its comprehensive strategy to overhaul gun laws in June of 2021. The ATF issued a memorandum to all special agents in charge and directors of industry operations that alerted them that single violations should now result in revocation proceedings. The Department of Justice was explicit in announcing it would be changing its enforcement regime, but for those dealers who willfully break the law and put public safety at risk by violating certain ATF requirements, ATF will seek to revoke their licenses pursuant to its zero-tolerance approach, absent exceptional circumstances. The new enforcement policy has resulted in a staggering increase in revocation recommendations. Since announcing this new policy, the ATF has initiated at least 273 revocation proceedings, and it's likely many more. Cargill points out that in his last ATF inspection in 2018, agents found 4 different types of violations in 35 out of more than 6,500 transactions, but didn't recommend a license revocation. Instead, the agency instructed Cargill to take simple corrective actions. Cargill is understandably concerned that the same error rate of less than 1% could now lead to the closure of his business and his loss of livelihood, even if the mistakes are simple as abbreviating county as CO, instead of spelling out the word completely. Hopefully, with the Republicans taking control of the House, the GOP will be able to start exercising some oversight when it comes to the abuses of Joe Biden's ATF and DOJ. That in itself won't stop the abuse, but it will at least shine a spotlight on what's going on behind the scenes, and could very well provide evidence that will work in Cargill's favor as the case makes its way up the judicial ladder to the Supreme Court. I have mad respect for Mr. Cargill filing a federal lawsuit against the ATF, and hopefully numerous gun groups will get behind this lawsuit. The only thing that worries me about the lawsuit, will the DOJ and the ATF now set their sights on Mr. Cargill and his gun shop? As always, I'd like to hear your thoughts about the story in the comments section. And if you guys could do me a large favor by helping out the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing and hitting those post notifications. And I hope to see you guys in the next video.